This is Gary Myers of the Daily News. We're here at Foley's in Midtown Manhattan to talk about the Daily News top 50 NFL players of all time. I'm joined right now by Hank Gola of the Daily News staff and Peter King, the editor-in-chief of the MMQB and also of NBC Sports. And Hank, why don't you start us off? We're going to be talking about our first list, which is 50 through 41.
Number 50, Tony Dorsett. Number 49, Earl Campbell. Number 48, Merlin Olsen. Number 47, Chuck Bednarik. Number 46, Rod Woodson.
Number 45, Walter Jones. Number 44, Jack Ham. Number 43, Bruce Matthews. Number 42, Franco Harris. Number 41, Ray Nitschke.
Well, the thing that strikes me about this bottom list, if you could call it a bottom list, is that these are throwback guys. These are football players. We've got almost an image gallery of tough guys where Bednarik standing over Gifford and Ray Nitschke glaring from out behind the face mask with the toothless and balding. Earl Campbell, giant shoulder pads running over guys. And of course, Art Shell, one of the most intimidating offensive linemen of all time. So, I mean, do you think, Peter, we've seen maybe the last of their ilk?
Well, Hank, I think what is really good about this list, looking at the whole list, is that we got Chuck Bednarik on this list. Because to me, even though it was 50 years ago, 54 years ago now, he's the last two-way player in NFL history, really, when you think about the classic days of two-way players. And he was so good, both as a center and as an intimidating presence on that front seven for the Eagles. And to me, I walked into Andy Reid's office when he coached the Eagles a few years ago, and he has that picture, okay, inscribed by Chuck Bednarik. And there's a couple of vulgarities on the photo that are basically like, this guy is not getting up. And so Andy Reid wants people to see that. He wanted the Eagles to have that image, that real tough guy image. So I think a lot of the guys on this list, they're enduring, which I'm glad they're on it.
And a guy like Ray Nitschke kind of epitomized football in the 60s, didn't he? You had that glare through the face mask,
right.
You know, the vapor coming out of his mouth when it's -2 degrees at Lambeau Field. That's what football is all about in that era.
Yeah, and the Nitschke thing, the thing that's so cool about having him here is that I think a lot of times because he kind of played in the shadow of Dick Butkus, you know, and you know, because Butkus was the real famous guy. And I remember looking one time and I said, man, Nitschke only made like 2 or 3 Pro Bowls. What's the story? And in those days, there was like one middle linebacker selected for the Pro Bowl, or maybe one extra linebacker. And so Butkus would always win. And so you think, well, Nitschke wasn't much of a player. But if you ask the guys on that defense, he was the centerpiece of the defense and the leader of that great Green Bay defense.
I think when you think of Lombardi's players, I think Nitschke comes to mind.
Right, he epitomizes everything about the Lombardi player. But you know, there's one other guy on this list that I think is so fitting, and that's Merlin Olsen. Because, I mean, you know, I've asked people over the years about the fearsome foursome, and as many people who say that Deacon Jones was the best guy on that front, that's how many people will say Merlin Olsen was. So I'm really glad he made the cut.
And a guy like Earl Campbell, who was such a physical runner and broke so many tackles, but maybe is paying for it, you know, physically now in the post-football years, you know, with the trouble that we've read about with him walking. Is that style a style of the past? Do you think running backs are going to play like that, knowing the toll that it takes on their body?
I don't think there are going to be running backs really like that as much anymore, because I think in those days, Earl Campbell was bigger than a lot of the linebackers there. And, you know, today, you're not going to face, especially on first down, you're never going to face a defensive lineman that's 265 pounds, you know, who's trying to tackle you. They're all going to be big mashers. So I just don't think we're going to see that much. I mean, the only kind of running backs we're going to see like that are the John Connor types, the fullbacks, but those fullbacks don't last a long
And they
time.
don't get the ball very much either.
Right, yeah, they never do anymore.
You know, in the new NFL, you don't hear the word punishing as much as in the past.
No, you don't. And like a DeMarco Murray, a guy who's a good all-around back now, he knows that he doesn't want to make his living lowering his head and going one-on-one with the linebackers.
Peter is one of our 15 esteemed panelists that helped us put together this list, and we thank you very much for that. Is there somebody that you're surprised somewhat that made the top 50, and is there one player here that you voted for that you're saying, what, I can't believe he's not on here?
I think every person, I looked on it on this list, every person is deserving. I can't say that there's no way that this guy should be on the list. The one guy who I really thought should be on the list who isn't is a modern guy, and that's Tony Gonzalez. I mean, he had 400 more catches than more than 400 more catches than any tight end who ever played. He can't make the list of the top 50. I just thought that was a real kind of glaring loss or glaring miss. But I think, look, you could argue about this all day, but I think the 50 are all deserving.
Well, Peter, thank you very much for joining us.
Okay, Gary.
You as well. We're back next week with 31 through 40, and our guest will be Ernie Accorsi, the former general manager of the New York Giants and a connoisseur of great quarterbacks.